The phone call had come out of the blue, and it was one I wasn't expecting. I had spoken to Grandpa just a few days ago, and everything had seemed fine. He was getting older. Of course, he had celebrated his 75th birthday a few months back, but he'd never been one to shy away from life. Still, there was something about his voice on the phone that made me stop what I was doing. "Come over," he said, his voice low but urgent. "We need to talk," that was all he said. He didn't explain what it was about or why he needed me to come, just that he needed to talk. And when Grandpa asked for something like that, I never said no. I made my way to his house in the suburbs of Cleveland, feeling that familiar, quiet sense of homecoming as I turned down the street. The old Victorian house had been in the family for generations. I'd grown up playing in the yard, running through the halls with my cousins, and spending lazy afternoons at his kitchen table, listening to his stories. His home was like an anchor in the storm of life, a constant, but when I arrived, the air felt different. The door was open, and there was no sign of his usual warm, welcoming self. I stepped inside, the creaky floorboards greeting me as I entered the dimly lit hallway. The old house smelled of dust and cedar wood, a smell that always reminded me of Grandpa's study where he used to keep his collection of antiques. I called out to him, "Grandpa?" "It's me, Lily." A soft shuffle of movement came from the living room. He was sitting there, as usual, in his worn recliner, the one he'd had for as long as I could remember. The chair was so old it had sagged in places, but it was still his throne. He sat, staring out the window with a distant look in his eyes. "Come in, Lily," he said without turning to look at me. I stepped forward cautiously, my nerves suddenly on edge. Grandpa had always been a man of few words, but his voice today carried a weight I hadn't heard before. There was a gravity to it, like he was carrying something too heavy for him to bear alone. "What's going on, Grandpa?" I asked, a little concerned now. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit down. We need to talk." I did as he asked, my heart thumping in my chest. Grandpa had always been a steady presence in my life. He was the one who had taken me in after my parents had passed when I was just a child. I never questioned the fact that he was my grandfather. I had always thought of him as my father, in many ways. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It shook me. Grandpa had always been strong, unwavering in his love and guidance. But now, there was something different. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "I've been keeping something from you, Lily," he said softly, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach tightening. He sighed, his gaze drifting back out the window. For a moment, it seemed like he might change his mind, like he might say something else entirely. But then he turned back to me, and his words hit me like a freight train. "You're not my biological granddaughter." For a moment, the words didn't make sense. I blinked, trying to process them, but they just hung in the air, completely out of place in the reality I thought I knew. "What?" I whispered, not understanding what he meant. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his voice low and heavy with the weight of years of secrecy. "You were adopted, Lily. Your parents, they weren't who you think they were." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I had to steady myself against the armrest of the chair, my head spinning. My whole life, I had been raised to believe that Grandpa was my blood, that I was part of his family in the deepest sense. But now it felt like everything I knew about myself was a lie. "What are you saying?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" Grandpa closed his eyes for a moment, his face contorting with regret. "I promised your real parents I wouldn't tell you. They asked me to keep the truth from you, to give you the life you deserved, away from the mess they left behind. I swore to protect you." I stood up suddenly, the air in the room too thick to breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep the secret?" "I had a right to know, Grandpa." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands, his fingers twisting the fabric of his old cardigan. The silence between us grew, filled with the weight of his unspoken words. I couldn't, he finally said, his voice thick. I wanted to, I swear I did, but there were things in their past, things I can't explain, and I couldn't break my promise. I felt a cold, heavy numbness take over. This was too much to absorb. The man who had raised me, who I had trusted more than anyone in the world, had kept this from me. So, who are my real parents? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grandpa swallowed hard, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I can't tell you that yet, Lily. Not until you're ready. I took a step back, my legs unsteady, like I was walking on foreign ground. Why? Why now? Why didn't you tell me before? I thought you were better off not knowing, he said, his voice trembling. But now, I think it's time for you to understand the whole truth. I owe you that. I didn't know what to say. The world had shifted under my feet, and I was falling into a void of uncertainty. My entire identity had been built on a lie, and I didn't know how to come to terms with it. I left his house that day in a daze, my thoughts a chaotic swirl of confusion and anger. The questions I had were endless, but the answers, they seemed so far out of reach. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone anymore, least of all the man who had been my father in all but blood. What had he kept hidden from me, and why? The truth was out there, but I wasn't sure I was ready to find it. The days following my conversation with Grandpa were a blur, but one thing remained clear. I couldn't stop thinking about what he told me. His admission that I wasn't his biological granddaughter had shaken my entire foundation. But as much as I tried to ignore it, I couldn't help but feel the pull of unanswered questions. Something about the way he had hesitated, the guilt in his voice, told me there was more to the story than he was willing to say. I spent every spare moment I had over the next week going through old family albums, boxes of letters, anything that might hold a clue to the truth. I was determined to understand why Grandpa had kept the secret, and more importantly, who my real parents were. But with each passing hour, I felt more like I was chasing shadows. One afternoon, as I sifted through a box of old papers in the attic, I stumbled upon something unexpected, a thick, leather-bound journal. It was tucked beneath a pile of photographs, as though it had been intentionally hidden. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The journal was old, its pages yellowed with age, and the leather was worn and cracked from years of use. I turned it over in my hands, wondering if it contained anything useful. I opened the first page carefully, the delicate paper crinkling under my touch. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the ink was dark, the script neat and deliberate. Lily is not what she seems, the entry began, sending a jolt of shock through me. I've made a promise to keep the truth hidden, but it's becoming harder to live with. I can only hope I've done the right thing, but I fear that when the truth comes to light, it will cost me more than I can bear. My heart pounded as I read. This was no ordinary journal. It felt like a confession, a deeply personal account of something that had been haunting Grandpa for years. But who had written it? And why did it feel like it was meant for my eyes? The next few pages were filled with similar entries, all vague and cryptic, mentioning promises made, secrets kept, and references to someone named Margaret, a name I didn't recognize. At one point, there was a mention of a deal made years ago, but the specifics were never explained. I sat back on my heels, the journal heavy in my hands. What had Grandpa been involved in? What kind of deal had he made? And why had it involved me? I couldn't stop now. I had to find out everything. I decided to visit Aunt Claire that evening. She had been the one who seemed most willing to listen, but her reluctance to tell me the full truth was starting to bother me. I needed her to open up, to tell me what she knew. I wasn't going to let her brush me off anymore. I arrived at her house just as the sun was setting. Her cozy home was familiar, comforting even, but tonight it felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, as though the walls themselves were keeping secrets. When Aunt Claire opened the door, she looked surprised to see me. "Lily, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost," I stepped inside, my mind racing with everything I had uncovered so far. Aunt Claire, I need you to tell me everything you know about my adoption. Please, this is bigger than just Grandpa. She closed the door behind me, her expression tense. Lily, you don't know what you're asking. I need answers, I insisted, my voice shaking with frustration. I have a right to know. Why didn't anyone tell me the truth? She motioned for me to sit down, but I stayed standing. I couldn't sit. Not yet. I don't know if it's my place to tell you, Lily. This is something your grandfather decided. He made a promise, and he's kept it for so long. I don't know why he's decided to open up to you now, but her voice trailed off, and she looked away, clearly conflicted. Tell me. I nearly shouted. Who were my real parents? Why did he keep this from me? Aunt Claire took a deep breath, running her hands through her hair. Lily, it's complicated. Your parents were, well, they were in a difficult situation. I don't know the full story, but I know they were part of something. Your grandfather was involved in a deal that had to stay quiet. What kind of deal? I asked, my voice low, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. She hesitated, as though weighing the consequences of revealing more. Finally, she spoke. I don't know the details. All I know is that your real parents were involved in something that could have ruined them. They didn't want you growing up in that world, so they asked your grandfather to take you in, and he promised to protect you, to keep you safe from whatever it was. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my mind spinning with what Aunt Claire had just said. I was no longer just a granddaughter. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand. Who were they? I demanded, my eyes narrowing. Who were my real parents? Aunt Claire's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, she whispered. I really don't, but you need to stop looking into this, Lily. You don't want to know. I stood there, feeling a cold wave of realization wash over me. There was so much more to the story than anyone was letting on. And the more I dug, the more I realized that the truth was not just painful, it was dangerous. I left Aunt Claire's house that night with more questions than answers. The journal had given me a glimpse into a world I couldn't quite understand, but it was clear now that the truth was something much bigger than I had imagined. Grandpa had kept his promise, yes, but it wasn't just to protect me. It was to keep me out of a web of secrets that had the potential to tear apart everything I thought I knew. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't leave this mystery unsolved. The next morning, I returned to Grandpa's house, more determined than ever to find out what he had kept hidden for so long. This time, I wouldn't back down. I couldn't stop thinking about the journal. What had Grandpa been involved in? Who were my real parents? And what was so dangerous about the truth that everyone felt the need to keep it hidden? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just wait for someone to tell me. I had to take matters into my own hands. The following morning, I went back to Grandpa's house. I needed to confront him. I needed answers. But I had no idea how difficult it would be to face him again. The house seemed different, somehow heavier, as if it had been holding its breath since I left. I knocked on the door, my pulse pounding in my throat. When Grandpa opened it, I was ready for the usual warm greeting. But when he saw me standing there, his expression darkened. There was a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. What is it, Lily? He asked, his voice low. I need to know everything, I said, my voice firm, though I could feel my hands trembling. I can't keep living in the dark. You owe me that. Grandpa looked down at his feet, his shoulders sagging. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, he stepped aside, motioning for me to enter. Come in then, he said quietly. But I warn you, this isn't going to be easy to hear. I followed him into the living room and sat down, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure if I was ready for the full truth, but I knew I couldn't back out now. Grandpa sat down across from me, folding his hands in his lap. You're right, he said, his voice gravelly. I've kept things from you, and I've kept them from everyone. But the truth? Well, it's complicated. More complicated than I ever thought it would be. I didn't know what to say. I just waited, my mind racing. The deal I made with your parents. It wasn't just about protecting you, Grandpa began, his voice breaking slightly. It was about keeping you out of something that was bigger than either of us. I leaned forward, desperate for more. What do you mean? What was bigger than us? He swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding mine. Lily, your real parents. They weren't just ordinary people. They were involved in something that could have ruined their lives and yours. They asked me to take you in because they knew the danger, and they wanted to protect you from it. They thought if you grew up with me, no one would ever suspect anything. I felt a chill creep over me. What were they involved in? Grandpa took a deep breath. I can't tell you everything. Not yet, but I'll tell you what I know. Your mother Margaret, she was in deep with some people who had connections, dangerous connections. They were involved in illegal activities, things I can't even describe. Your father, too. They were trying to get out, trying to start over, and they knew that if anyone found out, it would destroy all of us. I sat back, stunned. My mother Margaret had been involved in something criminal, and my father, whoever he was in it too. But why didn't they tell me? I asked, struggling to wrap my mind around the new reality he was presenting. Because they were trying to protect you, Lily, he said, his voice thick with emotion. They thought you'd be safer if you didn't know anything, if you were kept away from all of that. And they knew that if you ever found out the truth, you'd be in danger too. I couldn't breathe. The weight of what Grandpa was saying hit me like a wave. My entire life had been built on lies. The woman I had known as my mother, the one who had raised me, had been tangled up in something so much darker than I had ever imagined. I thought back to the letter I had found, the one Grandpa had written to my parents, promising to protect me. Was this the deal he had been talking about? Was this the secret he had sworn to keep? But I couldn't stop now, not when I was so close to the truth. I had to know more. Who were they working with? I asked, my voice tight. Who were they afraid of? Grandpa shook his head, looking torn. I don't know all the details, but I know they were connected to some dangerous people. People who wouldn't hesitate to do anything to protect their secrets. And they wanted to use your mother Margaret because she had information they needed. Your father, too. They were both in it, deep. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The truth was coming out, piece by piece, but it only made things more confusing. I wasn't just the granddaughter of a quiet man who had raised me. I was connected to a world of danger, deceit, and criminal activity. And my real father? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Who is he? Grandpa's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Your father's name. It doesn't matter. What matters is that he left. He disappeared. And your mother, Margaret, she tried to keep you safe by keeping you away from all of it. I agreed to raise you, to keep you from getting involved, to give you a chance at a normal life. But why couldn't you tell me this sooner? I demanded. Why didn't you tell me when I was old enough to understand? I promised, he said, his voice hoarse. I promised them I would protect you. I couldn't break that promise. And now, I don't know what to do. You've uncovered too much. I stood up, my hands shaking. I need to know everything, Grandpa. I can't go on living this lie. You owe me that. Grandpa looked up at me, his face a mask of regret and sorrow. Lily, I can't give you all the answers, but I'll help you find them. I'll help you understand what your mother and father were trying to protect you from. I felt a glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep this went, and the more dangerous it became. The days that followed my conversation with Grandpa were a blur of frantic searching. Every document, every letter, every whisper of a secret felt like it held the key to unlocking the truth about my parents. The more I dug, the more I realized just how tangled everything was. Grandpa had been right to hide things from me, but only because I wasn't prepared for what lay beneath. I spent hours at the local library, researching the few details I had. Margaret, my real mother, and the shadowy world she had been a part of. But the more I uncovered, the more frustratingly opaque it all became. There were no clear leads, No obvious connections, just snippets of names of people who seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth. And I was no closer to finding my real father. That's when I decided to confront Aunt Claire again. She knew more than she let on, and I couldn't afford to waste any more time. I called her, my resolve hardening with each ring. "Aunt Claire, I need you to help me," I said when she picked up. There was a long pause, and then she sighed. "Lily, I don't think I can." "Why not?" I pressed. "You've been holding back, and I need answers. You can't keep hiding the truth from me." "Not anymore. You don't understand what you're asking," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "There are things that are better left buried. Things that could hurt you and everyone else in this family." I clenched my fists, fighting back the anger bubbling up inside me. "I don't care anymore, Aunt Claire. I need to know. Please." Another long silence, then, "Meet me at the diner in an hour. I'll tell you what I know." I could feel my heart pounding as I arrived at the diner. Aunt Claire was already seated in a booth, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee. When she saw me, she gestured for me to sit down, but her face was etched with worry. "I've thought a lot about this," she said quietly as I slid into the seat across from her. "And I think you're right. You deserve to know the truth." I leaned forward, barely able to breathe. "What do you know, Aunt Claire?" She looked down at the table, as if gathering her thoughts. Your real parents were involved with a man named Jack Finley. He was connected to a powerful criminal network, one that was deeply entrenched in illegal dealings. Drugs, money laundering, all kinds of things. Your mother, Margaret, was trying to get out of it, but Jack kept pulling her back in. My stomach dropped. Jack Finley? That name was like a bolt of lightning, familiar but distant. I had heard whispers about him before, rumors of a shady businessman who had connections to the underworld, but I had never known the full extent. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Everything," Aunt Claire replied. "Your mother wanted to protect you. She knew that as long as you were part of that world, you'd never be safe. So, she made a deal with your grandfather. She asked him to take you in, to raise you away from the danger, and he agreed. But there's more." She hesitated again, glancing around the diner as if afraid someone might be listening. "Your father, the man you've never met, he was Jack Finley's right-hand man. He was a part of everything. And when your mother left him, she took you with her. But Jack didn't let go so easily. He tried to find her, to bring her back into the fold. And he didn't care who got hurt in the process." My mind was reeling, the pieces of the puzzle slowly falling into place. Jack Finley had been more than just a name. He had been the monster lurking in the background, the one who had put my mother and by extension, me at risk. But what was his connection to Grandpa? Why had Grandpa agreed to raise me in the first place? "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "Why did Grandpa protect me? Why did he get involved?" Aunt Claire looked at me, her face pained. "Because he loved you, Lily. He promised your mother that he would keep you safe. And he did. He kept you out of Jack's reach. But the danger's never really gone. You have to understand, Lily, there are people out there who will stop at nothing to get what they want." Her words hung in the air, but before I could process them, the door to the diner opened with a loud jingle. I turned, my heart dropping when I saw who walked in. It was Grandpa. He walked toward our booth with purposeful steps, his face set in a grim expression. When he reached the table, he didn't sit down. Instead, he stood there, looking at both of us. "Lily, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and tense. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't a casual conversation. Something had changed. Grandpa turned to Aunt Claire, his gaze hardening. "I told you not to tell her." "You promised." "I had no choice, Harold." Aunt Claire shot back, her voice steady but filled with an edge I hadn't heard before. "She deserves to know. She's already digging into things, and I wasn't about to let her go into this blind." Grandpa looked at me, his face conflicted. "Lily, this isn't the life I wanted for you. I didn't want you to be involved in any of this." But the truth is, I can't protect you forever. There are forces at play that are beyond any of us. My heart pounded, and my mind swirled with everything I had just learned. I had thought I was getting closer to the truth, but now I realized how much farther I had to go. And what's the truth? I demanded. Tell me what you've been hiding from me, Grandpa. I can't keep living like this, not knowing. Grandpa closed his eyes, his hand gripping the back of the chair as if it were the only thing keeping him standing. The truth is, there's more at stake than you realize. The people who were after your mother, after you, they're still out there, and they won't stop until they get what they want. That's why I kept the truth from you. I thought I could protect you, but I see now. I was wrong. The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. The danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. The conversation at the diner had left me reeling, but it was only the beginning. Grandpa's words echoed in my mind. There are forces at play that are beyond any of us. I couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. The truth had slipped out in fragments, pieces that didn't seem to fit together, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being dragged deeper into something I wasn't prepared for. I spent the next few days trying to get a handle on what had been said, what had been revealed. My research into Jack Finley led me nowhere. Every lead seemed to be dead, and the deeper I dug, the more I felt like I was drawing attention to myself in ways I couldn't control. It was as though I was digging up the bones of a buried past, but the grave wouldn't stay closed. The phone rang late one afternoon as I was going through another stack of documents in my living room. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. It was Aunt Claire. I answered immediately. Aunt Claire, what's going on? What's happening? Her voice came through shaky, tight with nerves. Lily, you need to stop. Please, I'm begging you. You're getting too close to something I don't think you understand. Too close to what? I demanded. I need the truth, Aunt Claire. You and Grandpa can't keep hiding it from me. I have a right to know. She was silent for a moment, and then I heard the sound of her taking a deep breath. You don't know the full extent of what you're dealing with. Jack Finley isn't just some name from the past. He's still active, still looking for your mother. And now, he knows you're searching. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, he knows I'm searching? You've been talking to people, poking around places you shouldn't be. You're drawing attention to yourself, Lily, and you don't even realize the danger you're in. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What do you expect me to do? Just let it all go? Live in ignorance? No, and Claire said, her voice cracking. I just don't want you to get hurt. You don't understand what's at stake. People like Jack, they don't care about who they hurt to get what they want, and they'll stop at nothing to get to you, to get to anyone who stands in their way. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The past, my past, was still alive, still hunting me. All this time, I thought the danger had passed, that I was safe. But now I realized how wrong I had been. I can't stop, Aunt Claire, I said, my voice firm despite the growing panic inside me. I need to know what happened to my parents, to me. I need to understand. There was a long pause before she responded, and when she did, her voice was filled with resignation. I tried to protect you. I did what I could, but I see now. You won't stop until you have the truth. Just be careful, Lily. Watch your back. I hung up the phone, my mind a whirlwind of fear, anger, and confusion. I had always felt safe in my life, but now, as the pieces of this puzzle clicked together, I realized how naive I had been. The next morning, I went to Grandpa's house, determined to get more answers. When I arrived, the house seemed colder, emptier. Grandpa wasn't there to greet me as usual, and the front door was slightly ajar. A feeling of dread washed over me. I pushed the door open and called out, Grandpa? It's me, Lily. No answer. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the darkened hallway. The house felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I moved cautiously through the living room, my footsteps muted on the old wooden floor. Then I saw an envelope, sitting on the coffee table, marked with my name and Grandpa's familiar handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated for a moment, then reached for it, tearing it open with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, written in Grandpa's hand, but this time, there was no warmth. The words were cold, almost final. "Lily, if you're reading this, then you've found the truth. I've tried to protect you, but I can't keep you safe from the past. The people who are after you, they're closer than you think. I've made a choice. I'm leaving. I don't want to, but I have no other choice. I've done everything I can for you, but now it's time for you to face what's been hidden from you all these years. I'm sorry for everything. Please understand that I did what I thought was best. Love, Harold." My breath caught in my throat. Grandpa had disappeared. And worse, he had left me a letter to explain why, but the more I read, the clearer it became. Grandpa was trying to shield me from something he could no longer protect me from. He was running, leaving everything behind. But why? What had happened to make him leave? And why didn't he tell me where he was going? I felt completely alone, the weight of his departure crushing me. The past that had always been buried so carefully was now spilling out, and the more I uncovered, the more dangerous it became. I spent the rest of the day trying to piece together what had happened, but as the hours ticked by, I realized one undeniable truth. The past wasn't finished with me yet, and now, I was more alone than ever. The darkness of the past had become an all-encompassing shadow. Grandpa was gone. I had no idea where he had gone, or if I would ever see him again. His letter had been clear. He was leaving to protect me, but it only raised more questions. Why had he left so suddenly? What had pushed him to go into hiding? And most importantly, what had he been protecting me from all these years? I couldn't afford to waste any more time. My search for the truth had reached a critical point, and I knew I couldn't do it alone anymore. I needed help. The walls I had been pushing against were closing in faster than I had anticipated, and I had no choice but to find out who else could be trusted. It was then that I remembered an old contact of mine, someone I hadn't thought of in years, but someone who might have the information I needed. Detective Jameson. He had been a family friend for as long as I could remember, and even though he'd retired from the force years ago, he still had connections. If anyone could help me piece this together, it was him. I called him that afternoon, trying to sound casual, though my heart raced with anticipation. "Detective Jameson?" I said when he answered. "It's Lily Parsons. I need your help." There was a long pause on the other end. "Lily? It's been a while. What's going on?" His voice was cautious, but I could hear the familiarity in it. "I'm in trouble," I said, feeling the weight of my words as they left my mouth. "I've been digging into my family's past, and I've uncovered things I don't understand, things that could put me in danger. I need you to help me find out who my parents really were." There was another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his tone was serious. "You know I can't just get involved in something like this, Lily. I'm retired, but I'll help you as much as I can. What have you found?" I told him everything, from the journal I'd found, to the details Aunt Claire had reluctantly shared, to the letter from Grandpa. As I spoke, I could hear the disbelief in his silence, the way the pieces were clicking into place in his mind. "That's a hell of a lot to take in," he said once I had finished. "I'll start looking into it. But you need to be careful, Lily. Whoever you're looking into, they're not going to stop. If your family was involved in the things you're suggesting, the people who were behind it don't just forget. They don't let go." "I know," I said, the fear creeping back into my chest. "But I can't stop now. I need to know everything. Please." He agreed to meet me the next day at his office. When I walked into his small, dimly lit space, I could immediately tell that he had been busy. There were piles of old files stacked on his desk, a whiteboard covered with notes, and a large corkboard cluttered with photographs and connections. I wasn't sure what I expected, but seeing the detective's office made the gravity of the situation feel real. Jameson motioned for me to sit down as he sorted through a stack of papers. "You've dug up a lot of things, Lily," he said, his eyes scanning over a photograph of my mother Margaret. "Your parents didn't leave much behind, but there's always a paper trail. And what you've uncovered, it's big, bigger than you realize." I sat down across from him, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" Jameson looked up at me, his expression grim. "What I've found is troubling. Your mother, Margaret, she wasn't just involved with Jack Finley. She was working with him. She had information that people like Finley would kill to protect." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of information?" "I can't say for sure yet," he replied, rubbing his temples. "But from what I've gathered, your mother had a connection to a series of illegal activities, money laundering, and possibly even murder. And the man you've been searching for, the one you think is your father, he was involved in this too." "They both were. But your grandfather, he kept you out of it, at least for as long as he could." I leaned back in my chair, the room feeling smaller with every word. The man I had known as my father figure, the person I had trusted more than anyone, had been keeping me away from this world of danger and deceit. But even he couldn't hide the truth forever. "So, what do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jameson looked at me with a steady gaze. "Now, you need to prepare yourself for what's coming. Because I'm afraid that as much as your grandfather tried to shield you, the past has caught up with you. People know you're asking questions, and if they know you're digging into what happened, they'll come after you." I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. "But I can't stop now. I need to know who my father is. I need to understand why this happened to me." Jameson nodded slowly. "I'll keep digging, but you have to be careful. And Lily, whatever you do, don't trust anyone who seems too eager to help. There are people out there who will say anything to get to you." I stood up, feeling the weight of his warning settle deep within me. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jameson gave me a sharp nod. "Stay safe, Lily." As I left his office, I realized that I was no longer just searching for the truth, I was actively running from the danger it brought with it. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized that I wasn't just searching for my parents anymore. I was searching for a way out of the web that had entangled my life. The weeks that followed my meeting with Detective Jameson felt like a whirlwind. The more I dug into my family's past, the more the world I thought I knew began to unravel. My entire life, every memory, every relationship had been built on a lie, a web of deceit spun by the very people I had trusted most. And now, the truth was no longer a question of curiosity, it was a ticking time bomb, one that I was too close to defusing. I had received the phone call late one evening, just after I had returned from another fruitless search. It was from Jameson. The tone of his voice was more serious than usual, more urgent. "Lily," he said, "I need you to come to the station. We've got a break in the case, and this time, it's bad news." My heart skipped a beat. I had been waiting for a breakthrough, but I hadn't been prepared for this. "I'll be right there," I said, hanging up without another word. When I arrived at the station, I found Jameson standing in the same dimly lit corner office where I had spoken to him last. His face was drawn, his eyes tired, but there was something else in his gaze now, something that made my stomach drop. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "This is going to be difficult to hear." I sat, bracing myself. "We traced your mother's activities, the people she was connected to," Jameson began, his voice steady but filled with regret. "And we found something, a file, hidden away in an old safe deposit box. Inside was a letter, a confession." "Really? Your mother, Margaret, she wasn't just involved in the criminal activities you've heard about. She was planning something big, something that could have exposed the entire operation." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Jameson leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "Your mother had evidence that could have brought down some very dangerous people, and she was going to use it to destroy them before they destroyed her. But before she could, she disappeared." And not long after, Jack Finley, her partner in all of this, was killed. It's all connected, Lily. The weight of his words hit me like a sledgehammer. My mother wasn't just a victim of circumstance, she had been a player in something far bigger. And Jack Finley, the man who had haunted my search for so long, was just the tip of the iceberg. Where's the letter? I asked, my voice tight. We've got it, Jameson said. But there's more. We also found evidence of a large sum of money that was meant for you. Your mother left it for you, Lily. She wanted to make sure you were taken care of when the time came. My breath caught in my throat. Money? My mother had left me something? Where is it? I asked, my voice shaking. Jameson's expression hardened. That's the problem. The money. It's gone, vanished. And I'm afraid it's tied to more than just your family's past. The people your mother was trying to take down, they know you're asking questions. They know you're getting close to the truth, and they won't stop until they get what they want. I felt my heart race as the full weight of his words sank in. I had been so focused on the search for my parents, the truth about my mother, that I hadn't realized just how dangerous the game I was playing had become. They're coming after me, I whispered. Jameson nodded grimly. They've already made their move, Lily. They know you're close, and they know you're vulnerable. You need to leave town, now. They won't hesitate to make sure you don't get any further. I stood up abruptly, my mind racing. I couldn't leave. Not now, not when I was so close to understanding everything. But Jameson was right. The past was coming for me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Where do I go? I asked, panic rising in my chest. How do I get out of this? There's nowhere to run, Jameson said softly. The only way out is to face them. You have to go public, Lily. You need to expose everything before they get to you. Expose it? How? I was barely holding myself together now. I don't have any proof. All I have is a few letters, some old files, and a bunch of questions. Jameson took a deep breath. You're wrong. You have more than that. You have the truth. And that's the one thing they can't take away from you. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of his words pressing down on me. He was right. I had the truth. But now I had to decide what to do with it. I couldn't run from this anymore. I couldn't hide in the shadows, hoping the past would forget about me. I had to face it head on. The decision was made. I would go public, expose everything, my mother's involvement, the dangerous world she had been a part of, and the people who were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to slip up. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't do this alone. I needed to trust Jameson, and I needed to trust myself. The past had already claimed too much of my life. Now, it was time for me to take back what had been stolen. The decision to go public was not one I made lightly. I spent days gathering everything I could, everything Jameson and I had uncovered, the letters, the documents, and the confession my mother had left behind. It wasn't much, but it was enough to paint a picture, enough to bring the truth to light. I couldn't stop now, not after everything that had been revealed. I had my meeting with the local press scheduled. The story would be told, every sordid detail exposed. But the night before I was set to meet with the journalist, the worst happened. A warning. It came in the form of an anonymous email. Stop digging, Lily. You don't know what you're dealing with. Stay out of this, or it will be your last mistake. The words were chilling. A direct threat, no doubt, from someone connected to my mother's past. I stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of the danger closing in on me. I had never been more afraid in my life, but I couldn't let fear control me. I had come too far. I showed the email to Jameson, who wasn't surprised. They're trying to intimidate you. It's their last move, Lily. But you're right, this is the moment. We can't back down now. And so, the next morning, I sat down with the journalist, and I told them everything. I revealed the dark connections my mother had, the things she had uncovered, and the dangerous people she had been running from. I told them about Jack Finley and his criminal empire, and how my grandfather had sacrificed his own peace of mind to protect me from the truth. I expected fear. But what I didn't anticipate was the rush of relief that followed. Once I spoke the truth, once I put it out there in the open, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The years of secrecy, the layers of lies, the constant fear, they all seemed to dissolve in that one moment, but the danger didn't go away. Not right away. The media frenzy that followed was intense. The people I had uncovered, the ones who had kept the truth hidden, came after me in ways I hadn't expected. Threatening phone calls, shadowy figures lurking outside my home, constant fear of what would happen next. But despite the fear, despite the threats, I knew one thing. I had done what I had set out to do. Over time, the truth began to take its toll on the people who had kept it hidden. The people who had been involved in my mother's criminal dealings were brought to justice, some through the legal system, others by forces more shadowed and dangerous than I could ever have imagined. Jack Finley's empire crumbled as the full scope of his crimes came to light, and with it, the many other victims who had been silenced for far too long. Grandpa was never found, but I didn't stop searching. He had done what he had promised to do. He had kept me safe, even if it meant disappearing into the shadows. I didn't know if I would ever see him again, but I hoped, in my heart, that he was out there somewhere, still watching over me. As for me, I moved on. I found peace in knowing that I had the truth. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't painless, but I had taken back control of my life. I had faced my past, my identity, and the lies that had been woven around me. The truth had been a heavy burden to carry, but in the end, it was what set me free. I never stopped wondering about my parents, what they might have been like, what they wanted from me. But I had come to terms with the fact that I would never fully understand their choices. What mattered now was the life I was building, the future I was creating for myself, far from the shadows of the past. And as I stood in front of my own reflection, no longer haunted by the unknown, I knew that in the end, the truth had won. Where quiet truth becomes justice sometimes. The past has to be torn apart to build a future that's worth living. Author's note. This story is a reflection on the long-lasting effects of hidden truths and the moral weight of secrecy. Lily's journey highlights the importance of confronting the past, no matter how difficult or dangerous it may be. Her journey is one of courage and self-discovery, showing that while the truth may be hard to bear, it ultimately brings clarity and freedom. Even without graphic violence, the resolution of this story emphasizes that justice, when sought with persistence and integrity, often delivers its own form of karmic closure.